A Massachusetts Tale. Autumn winds howled relentlessly through the corridors of Wentworth Hall. The old dormitory had housed youths attending the university for almost a century. They often complained about the icy cold that found its way into the old structure when skies turned gray with dark clouds, ushering in the harsh reality of a fast-approaching Massachusetts winter. One of the new young inmates of Wentworth, Maurice Beacon, was tiny for his age. At 17, when all his peers had shot up in height and girth, Maurice had languished at a mere 5 foot and weighed in at 120 pounds. His diminutive stature had been the cause of many a joke in his new school, and although he tried to brush off insensitive remarks, they did in fact hurt him. October in Blenheim, Massachusetts, brought with it, along with swirls of golden wind-blown leaves, a sense of eerie anticipation. A new academic year, teachers new and old, freshman faces, and of course, the hazing. The town folks had long been accustomed to this yearly tradition. Older gentry frowned, but put up with the rowdy shenanigans and pranks. Some made sure that their doors were locked, shades drawn, and lights turned down. Maurice knew that he would have to take part in the initiation that was mandatory for a new boy. To refuse would have only added to the references of his small stature. What indeed had they planned for him? He nervously entered the great dining hall and sat with a group of new students. After a dinner of roast beef and buttered string beans, names were called out in alphabetical order. Maurice was the second name to be called. Your task, Maurice Beacon, is to go to the Blenheim Cemetery after midnight. You will bring with you this large metal spike and hammer. When you go through the cemetery gates, you are to turn right and walk about 5 minutes to the unconsecrated grounds. There, you will come upon 3 large nameless gravestones. Your task is to hammer the spike into the middle stone. In the morning, we will check and make sure that you have fulfilled your assignment. A northeast wind had blown off the Atlantic Ocean that evening, and the temperatures had become nothing less than bone-chilling. Maurice sat in his sparse dormitory room, wrapped in 2 sweaters and a scarf. Reading would help pass the time and make the midnight hour come quicker. He listened to the clangs of the old church clarion, marking each passing hour, and at the stroke of midnight, he put an overcoat over his 2 sweaters, wrapping his long red scarf firmly around his neck, leaving the 2 ends hanging loosely over the back of his shoulders. He shuddered a little. Maurice had heard stories of Blenheim Cemetery. It was an area known for 17th century witch burials, and he wondered if it were their graves that were found in the unconsecrated grounds. A cloud-filled night did not allow for a moonlit journey. Periodically, the howls of the wind would suddenly die down, and the quiet of the very early morning was interrupted only by an occasional hoot owl. Maurice made his way along the main street landing from the University to Cemetery Road, about a 20-minute walk all told. The bitter wind hurt his forehead and cheeks, and he shielded his face with his warm woolen mittens. With each step that he took, he could feel a large hammer thump in the coat pocket against his leg. When Maurice arrived at the cemetery, the gate was slightly ajar. Even without the proper lighting, he knew that he could use the iron railing to guide himself to the unconsecrated grounds. He turned right. The 3 boulder-type stones lay straight ahead, just as he had been told. A slight break in the clouds had allowed the moon to reveal their resting place. Reaching into his deep pocket, he grasped the heavy hammer with one hand, and from the other produced the long metal spike. The moon had disappeared. Spike and hammer in hand, Maurice completed his task with all his might. 3 heavy blows, and the spike was driven deep into the hard rock. He knew that his accomplished feat would serve him in good stead with the other boys. Turning on his heels to retrace his steps along the guardrail, something suddenly clutched him from behind, holding him back, making his senses reel. It had caught him firmly by the neck, causing him to gasp for air. Maurice struggled violently to release himself, but with each effort it pressed itself even tighter around his neck. He flailed back and forth, trying frantically to release himself from the superhuman grip. Spittle ran down the corners of his mouth, and his eyes bulged out in desperate fear. After breakfast the following morning, the taskmaster, along with a few other seniors, made their way to the cemetery to check if Maurice had completed his task. There, they found his lifeless body on the ground, laying against the unmarked gravestone. Hammered into the boulder-like stone were both ends of Maurice's long red scarf.